My 13-year-old daughter spent 4 days preparing food for my dad's 60th birthday. At the last minute, my mother wrote, "Plans have changed. We're celebrating at a restaurant. Adults only." I didn't respond. I just took action, and waited. 17 hours later, my front door shook under my parents' fists. My daughter Emma spent 4 days preparing food for my dad's 60th birthday, not playing pretend or tossing together something basic. She ran it like a professional caterer. I watched her make spreadsheets and ingredient lists, price things out, even color code who had allergies or special diets. She did it all because she was proud to be part of it, proud to do something special for her grandfather. It started weeks earlier when I told her we were having the party at our place, just like we always did. Everyone was supposed to come, 32 people in total. The plan was simple: we host, everyone brings a little something, and Emma wanted to be the main chef. She begged for it, said she wanted to make everything, not just one dish. My wife and I tried to talk her out of taking on too much, but she wouldn't hear it. So we let her, and we watched her turn into a machine. She made sliders, 3 kinds of cupcakes, fruit skewers, mini quiches, homemade chips with dip, trays of baked pasta, and little jars of lemonade with tags that had people's names on them. I'm not even listing everything. She printed menus and tucked them into napkin rings she made from twine. She wrote a short speech for my dad. It was sweet and a little awkward, exactly what you'd expect from a kid who just wanted to show love. She worked right up to bedtime the night before. Then, at 10:47 p.m., my mom sent the text. "Plans have changed. We're celebrating at a restaurant. Adults only." That was it. No context, no "We're so sorry." No mention of Emma. Nothing. Just a casual announcement like we were being uninvited from a dentist appointment. I showed my wife. We just sat there. She asked if I was going to respond. I said, "No." What was there to say? We didn't tell Emma that night. She'd gone to bed with her speech cards next to her pillow. I couldn't do it yet. In the morning, she was already in the kitchen by the time we got up. She had a notepad out, checking off tasks, planning the heating schedule, fixing one of the place cards that had gotten a bit bent. She asked me when people would start arriving. I had to tell her. She stood there for a second. I think she thought I was joking at first. Then she just nodded, walked past me, and closed her bedroom door. An hour later, we heard her crying through the wall. My wife sat on the floor in the hallway outside Emma's door, just waiting, not saying anything. It was that kind of silence that feels heavier than yelling. We didn't go to the restaurant. We didn't call. We didn't respond to the family group chat that buzzed all day with photos and dumb jokes and pictures of the cake someone else had brought. I checked Facebook later. The restaurant was packed. Everyone was there, eating pasta, drinking wine, smiling, laughing. My dad was holding a glass of champagne. There were kids at the table, Emma's cousins same age. So much for adults only. Not a single person noticed we weren't there. Not one message asking why we hadn't shown up. Not one call. Emma didn't come out of her room until dinner. We sat there in silence, eating leftover pasta she'd made for the party that never happened. She didn't say a word the entire meal, just pushed her food around and stared at her plate. We didn't say anything to anyone. We just let it sit. Then, 17 hours after the restaurant party, someone started pounding on our front door like the house was on fire. I didn't need to look, I already knew who it was. The pounding didn't stop. It wasn't knocking, it was full-blown fists slamming into the door like they were trying to break it down. My wife glanced at me from the couch. Emma was still in her room. I stood up and took my time walking over. Sure enough, it was my parents. My dad looked annoyed, like we had caused them trouble. My mom launched right into it, something about how we should have let them know we weren't coming, how they had to rearrange seating at the last minute. No mention of Emma. Not one word. I just held the door open and waited. Then my dad said it. "It's not that big of a deal. She's a kid." He actually shrugged. That's when I told them to leave. No yelling, no arguing. I just said, "You should go," and shut the door in their faces. My mom said something right as it closed, but I didn't care enough to listen. They stood outside for a few minutes, muttering, then left. The next morning, I made a decision. For 6 months, I'd been covering rent for my younger brother Jake, and his wife and their kid. They were in a rough patch, Job loss, medical bills, the whole thing. My parents had asked me to help, said they were tapped out, and I agreed. $1,200 a month, no questions asked. That morning, I logged into my banking app and canceled the automatic payment. Jake called that night confused. I told him the truth, there wasn't going to be a 7th month. He didn't argue. He just said okay, and hung up. The next day, the door pounding happened again. This time all three of them, my parents and Jake, showed up. My dad was angrier this time, and my mom was crying, saying they had no savings left, that they needed time, that Jake's kid would be homeless. I let them in. My wife stayed back in the hallway, listening. They didn't waste time blaming us for making things worse. My mom said things like, "It was just a dinner. Why are you being so dramatic?" Jake looked uncomfortable the whole time, clearly unsure what he was even doing there. When I told them Emma had cooked for 4 days, my dad rolled his eyes and actually said it again. "It's not that big of a deal." That was it for me. I told them to leave and not come back. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door. I just made it clear they weren't welcome in this house anymore. 2 days later, I found out Jake and his family had moved into my parents' house, not temporarily, like a full move-in. They were broke, my parents were broke, but now they were stuck together, living under one roof, sharing food, sharing bills, sharing problems. And none of them were my problem anymore. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. After I kicked them out, the silence felt good. Not peaceful, just heavy and deserved. I didn't say a word to my parents for the next couple of days, and I didn't hear a thing from Jake either. I figured they were regrouping, probably trashing me in their little pity circle, acting like victims. Then I got a notification from my bank, the cancelled rent payment was due, and the automatic transfer had failed as expected. Jake must have seen it too, because that night around 10 p.m., he called. No small talk. He said the payment didn't go through. I said, "That's because I cancelled it." He didn't ask why. He didn't plead or argue. He just sat with the silence, then mumbled something like, "All right," and hung up. The next morning, all three of them showed up at my door again. My mom started crying the second I opened it, going on about Jake's kid and how they had no options. My dad wasn't even pretending anymore. He was angry, red-faced, trying to guilt-trip me with garbage like, "You're punishing your brother for something he didn't do." But they still hadn't apologized to Emma. Not once. In fact, every time I brought her up, they waved it off like it was nothing. My dad even repeated the same line like a broken record. "She's 13. She'll get over it." It was like they had no idea who she was, or who I was, for that matter. That girl had given them everything she had, time, energy, love, and they tossed her aside like she was an afterthought. That was the last time I opened the door to them. 2 days later, I heard from a mutual cousin that Jake and his family had moved into my parents' house, not as guests, permanently. They had no money left. My parents couldn't cover their bills anymore, not with Dad's part-time work and Mom's ridiculous shopping habits. Now they were all stuck under the same roof. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. I didn't hear it from Jake, but his wife Melissa texted my wife a few days in. The message was short but brutal. "Your parents are toxic." I wasn't surprised. I'd grown up with it. Jake had too, but he'd always tried to play the peacekeeper, keep his head down. Now he was in it full time. So I decided to show him what he'd never seen. I went back into my old messages, texts and emails from our parents. Screenshots of conversations where they tore him down. Stuff like, "We can't count on him. He's never been good with money. He's going to screw up that kid's life." They'd used him when they needed rent paid, when they needed groceries, when they needed someone to blame. And now that he was under their roof, it was only going to get worse. I sent the screenshots without any explanation. Just dropped them in a message and left it alone. 2 hours later, he called me. He didn't yell, didn't get emotional. Just said, "Thanks. I didn't know." The next few days were quiet. Then Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. It was Melissa again. We left. No other details, but I found out later from another cousin that they packed their things in the middle of the night, loaded their car, and drove to a friend's basement apartment. No plan, no job lined up. Just out. That same week, Jake picked up work doing construction cleanup. Hard hours, bad pay, but it was something. Then a second job delivering groceries in the evenings. Melissa found some remote admin gig, part-time. They were tired, broke, barely sleeping, but they were finally standing on their own. That text he sent me after their first week said everything. I finally get it. You were right. Emma never knew about the rent, never knew about the texts or any of it. But she did get a surprise package a few days later, a card from Jake's kid with a drawing of Emma holding a tray of cupcakes and a note that said, "Thank you for cooking. My dad says you're amazing." That night, she smiled for the first time in a week. My parents? They were alone now. No kids, no grandkids, no backup plan. And the worst part for them, they'd done it all to themselves. But things weren't done unraveling. Not even close. By the following week, the fallout started spreading. It wasn't just about who was living where or who stopped talking to whom. This thing started bleeding out into the rest of the family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I hadn't spoken to in months. It turns out when you screw over a 13-year-old girl who just wanted to cook for her grandpa's birthday, word gets around. It started small. A cousin of mine messaged me asking why we hadn't shown up to the party. She'd only heard from my mom that we had other plans. So I told her, not the dramatized version, not to stir up pity, just the facts. The text, the 4 days of cooking, the adults only, lie, Emma crying in her room while the family smiled for pictures with pasta. My cousin didn't respond right away, but 3 hours later, she shared that exact story in the extended family group chat. Screenshots and all. That lit the match. People were furious, not just at what my parents had done, but how they'd hidden it. A few relatives had asked why Emma wasn't there, and my parents told them we'd decided not to come. Like it was a mutual thing. Like we had just changed our minds. The truth didn't sit well with anyone, especially because Emma had made little cards and menus with people's names. Some of those relatives had them saved in their phones from a visit the week before, when she'd shown them off proudly. Suddenly I was getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. A couple of them apologized for not realizing sooner. Others were angry they'd been lied to. But what really stunned me was how fast it turned. My Aunt Sherry texted my mom something like, "You cut your granddaughter out of her own grandfather's birthday. Don't contact me again." I only saw that because my cousin forwarded it. Then the family reunion planning committee, yes, that's a thing in our family, removed my parents from the email chain. No explanation, just gone. They'd hosted the last 3 reunions. Now they weren't even invited. My mom tried calling everyone. No one picked up. Dad made a Facebook post a few days later, something passive-aggressive about how families should stick together, not attack each other over misunderstandings. Comments were disabled within the hour. And Jake? He stayed quiet. He and I weren't suddenly best friends again, but we talked a little more. He sent updates when he got his first real paycheck from the new job. They moved out of the basement a few weeks later into a tiny rental, cramped, but theirs. I told him I'd help him with the deposit. He refused. "We've got it," he said. "We're doing this on our own now." Emma didn't say much about any of it, but one night she asked if she could invite Jake's kid over for dinner. I said, "Sure." She made the sliders again, set the table, played music while she cooked. She was herself again. As for my parents, no one was talking to them. Not me, not Jake, not the cousins, not even the people they used to gossip with. They were cut off. For once in their lives, they were the ones on the outside looking in. They'd started this, but they hadn't realized how far it would reach. A month went by without a word from them. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was strange at first. My mom used to call constantly about the most mundane things. What to make for dinner, which detergent was on sale, complaints about neighbors. That noise, that constant buzz of someone trying to stay relevant in your life, was suddenly gone. And not just for me. For everyone. They disappeared from the group chats, stopped being tagged in family photos. They weren't invited to birthdays, didn't show up in anyone's Instagram stories. Even at church, I heard from someone that they'd started sitting in the back row and slipping out right after the final prayer. My mom tried once, one email, maybe 3 lines long. "We didn't mean to hurt Emma. This is all being blown out of proportion. Can we talk?" I didn't respond. She tried Jake too, sent him a long message trying to pin everything on me. Claimed I'd manipulated him, stirred things up, turned the family against them. Said they missed their grandson and didn't deserve to be exiled from their own family. Jake forwarded it to me with one sentence. "They haven't changed." He didn't reply to her either. What they didn't get, What they never really understood is that this wasn't about one party. It wasn't about food or Facebook pictures or who hosted what. It was about who you show up for, who you choose when no one's watching. They chose themselves. They could have made it right a dozen different ways. They could have come straight to Emma, looked her in the eye, and said, "We messed up." But they didn't. They kept minimizing it, brushing it off like it didn't matter. Emma wasn't angry anymore. She was just done. She didn't ask about them, didn't mention them. It was like some switch flipped, and she stopped trying to figure out why they'd done it. Kids know when love isn't real, even if they can't put it into words. Jake kept grinding. He picked up extra shifts and started looking into trade certifications. Melissa opened an Etsy shop and began making decent side income. They weren't rich, but they were finally independent. And something shifted in Jake. He stood taller, sounded different when he talked. Sharper, more sure of himself. And me? I started letting go. Not out of bitterness, just acceptance. You can't carry people who've made a habit of kicking you while you're holding them up. The silence wasn't punishment. It was peace. But for my parents, it was something else entirely. The silence meant they had no one left, and that realization was starting to eat them alive. It happened on a Sunday morning, the kind that usually feels calm before the week kicks in. Emma and I were at a small diner she likes, not too far from home. She was telling me about the school cooking competition she wanted to enter, flipping through her little notepad where she'd scribbled down ideas. You wouldn't know by looking at her how badly she'd been hurt a few weeks ago. She looked focused, excited, like she'd come through something and landed on her feet. Then I saw them. My parents were sitting at a table near the window. No food, just coffee in front of them. My dad was staring out the window like he wasn't really there. My mom looked straight at me. She gave a little wave, not a smile, just that awkward little flick of fingers people do when they don't know what else to do. I didn't wave back. Emma didn't even notice them. She was halfway through explaining why she wanted to make lemon rosemary cookies for her competition. I didn't tell her right away, but once we were in the car, she asked if that was Grandma and Grandpa in the diner. I said, "Yeah." "Do you think they're still mad?" "No," I said. "I think they're just sad now." And that was the truth. That diner wasn't just a breakfast spot, it was a glimpse into what their life had become. Empty table, no conversation, no one waiting for them at home. A few days later, Jake sent me a mass email our parents had sent to the whole extended family. It was long, dramatic, and full of excuses. They didn't mention Emma's name once, just phrases like misunderstandings, overreactions, the pain of being cut off by your own blood. At the end they wrote, "We love our family. Please don't shut us out." Only one person replied. It was our cousin Mark. He wrote, "Did you ever apologize to Emma?" No answer. Nothing after that. Radio silence. After that email, things just fell away for them. The invites stopped. People began removing them from group chats. Birthdays, barbecues, baby showers, no one thought to include them anymore. Even people who used to defend them, who used to say things like, "Well, your dad just comes off rough," or "Your mom means well," started staying quiet. Because there was no way to justify what they'd done. Not when a 13-year-old girl had been the one hurt the most. And the people who stuck around? They weren't really around. They were polite at best, cold at worst. Jake, meanwhile, had hit his stride. He was still working 2 jobs, still exhausted, but he told me he felt something he hadn't in years, like he had control over his own life. He was saving up for a used car. Melissa was running her Etsy shop full-time now, and even teaching a few online classes. They were rebuilding from the ground up, and you could feel the shift. Emma kept cooking. She got into the school competition and made it to the final round. She invited Jake's kid over to test recipes. The two of them would sit at the kitchen counter, giggling while they rolled out dough or stirred icing. I caught Emma humming once while she worked. It hit me hard because it was the same tune she was humming the night before my dad's birthday, back when she thought she was doing something meaningful for people who mattered. That music was back. That light. And my parents? I saw my mom one more time at the grocery store, by herself, with a near-empty cart. She looked thinner, tired. She stood at the entrance for a few seconds like she was looking for someone, but there was no one left. They weren't just alone because we'd shut them out. They were alone because, over the years, they'd slowly driven away every good thing they had. With pride, with control, with the belief that they'd always be the center of the family. But they're not. Not anymore. That spot now belongs to the people who show up, who say sorry when they've hurt someone, who choose love over ego. That spot belongs to Emma, to Jake and Melissa, to every person who saw what happened and chose to do better. And for my parents? It's too late. Months had passed since everything exploded. The air had cleared in a way, not forgotten, not healed, but quiet. And honestly, we were better off. Emma was doing great. She'd taken second place in her school cooking competition with this ridiculous lemon lavender shortbread that stunned the judges. Jake had landed a solid warehouse job with benefits and overtime. And Melissa's Etsy shop had somehow gone from side hustle to full-time business when one of her custom designs went viral. For once, everyone was just okay. Then Emma got the letter. No return address, just her name in neat cursive on the envelope. She opened it right there at the kitchen table, read the first few lines, then looked at me and slid it across. It was my mom's handwriting. Not a rant, not a guilt trip, a letter just for Emma. And it wasn't what I expected. It started with, "I don't deserve you reading this, but I hope you do." Then it got honest. Shockingly honest. My mom admitted they lied to the family about why we didn't come to the party. She admitted they changed the plans because they wanted something fancier and thought Emma's cooking wasn't appropriate for such a big event. She said they were wrong, selfish, cruel. She said she'd never forget the way Emma looked when she realized no one was coming, and that she'd been seeing it in her sleep ever since. She wrote, "I was trying to protect an image of your grandfather that didn't need protecting, and I destroyed something real in the process." There was no begging, no asking for forgiveness. Just an admission that she'd failed and that she hoped one day Emma would remember her for more than that one night. Emma didn't cry, didn't react much at all. She folded the letter carefully and said, "I don't know what to do with this." Then she went to her room and tucked it in her desk. 2 days later, Jake got one too. He called me right after reading it, his voice different, calm but thrown off. "She admitted everything," he said. "Stuff I didn't even know she remembered. Even how they used you financially. It's weird, it didn't feel like manipulation this time. I didn't know what to make of it either." So we waited. Then, a week later, Mark, our cousin, the one who'd called her out in the group chat, called me out of the blue. Said he'd been talking to someone from their church and that my parents had been going to therapy regularly, quietly for months. He said, "Apparently your mom broke down during a group session. Just sobbed through the whole thing. Said she didn't know how to fix what she ruined." I didn't say anything. I just sat with it. They weren't posting vague Facebook guilt trips. They weren't calling. They weren't asking for anything. They were just gone, silent, and apparently trying. Emma hasn't said much since the letter, but I've caught her reading it once or twice when she thinks no one's watching. She hasn't responded. Neither has Jake. But the rage is gone. The pain isn't, but the wall around it has cracks now.